I'm excited about the following keynote speaker topic, honestly. Choosing metrics for success. Sandi Conroy here is a certified professional coach with a passion for empowering individuals to achieve their ultimate life and career aspirations. Hailing from the vibrant United Kingdom, she holds a background in science and mathematics, actually. So this provides her with a solid foundation for approaching challenges with precision and logical thinking. Now, let's give her an enthusiastic welcome as she takes the stage.
Everything working? You can hear me okay? Great. Perfect. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, I am now an executive coach and spent many years working in the data leadership space for companies like Facebook and Workday to help their teams choose metrics. So that's where I learned all this from. And today I want to talk to you about choosing metrics for success. And specifically, having a healthy relationship with metrics is the best shortcut to either having a successful product, learning and iterating, or failing fast if that's the destiny. And so I'm going to walk through what makes a metric a good choice, how specifically to choose them for your product or area. We'll do some examples, and then I'm also going to give you the 3 things where people usually fail, even the big guys. So knowing these things to avoid are going to help you. So what are metrics meant to do? I said you should have a healthy relationship with metrics, and that means asking them for the things they can provide, but not necessarily relying on them for more. And metrics serve 2 main purposes. First, they help you build a product in line with your mission, and they're not a replacement for a mission, and I'm going to talk a bit about that soon. And they also help you measure and track your progress to report back out to your team, to external, to investors, how your product is actually doing. Metrics fit, particularly an ecosystem, in a particular spot. So the order of operations is really important here. By working on your mission first, and a mission or a vision statement is just a language explanation of what your product is trying to do. It's specific, it's opinionated, and it really helps your teams focus on the top 1 to 2 priorities. Once that's developed, that's when we can start talking about metrics, because metrics are really just a quantified version of our mission. They are how we measure if we are accomplishing that mission or not. They aren't meant to be super opinionated on their own. Following that, we can talk about project plans, and that's about what work can we do that will increase these metrics the most. And then we can talk about goals, and goals are just how much we'll move the metric. So we want to increase adoption as our metric by 10%. So I would be remiss to not talk a bit about missions since the metrics are so reliant on it. And the number 1 mistake that can be made is by trying to put metrics first and being too reliant on them. What you'll see if you try and do that is you're going to struggle to come up with metrics, because the reason you don't have a mission written down isn't because it's clear and obvious. It's because it's difficult and that work hasn't been done yet. So you'll struggle to come up with a metric. You're going to get a composite metric where they add a bunch of things together, and you're going to cycle through that again in 6 months because you're not really sure what you're trying to accomplish. So that's the first mistake. So let's talk about how to write a good mission so that the good metrics can follow. And the second mistake we make is that it needs to be about user value. It can't be about you or your place in the market. So I've seen very large companies put out a product mission that starts like this: become the industry leader in. It is perfectly fine to have business goals. It is perfectly fine to want to win. The problem is when you do this, don't do that. But when you do that, instead of your product focus, when you go to try and make product decisions, the answers are going to be about yourself. They're going to be about how to win, how to make more money. They're not going to be about how to serve users. And the secret trick is, in order to be successful, you have to go through a path of serving users. You need to build something that people want to use, that they are continue to use in order to get to that long-term success. So skip right through that. That's what makes a bad mission. Let's talk about good missions for a minute. A good mission reflects value for your users or customers. This applies if you're talking about internal customers, external customers, B2B, B2C. There's someone that is using your product, and that's who you want to help. You'll be able to tell if it improves. Making the world more open. Did we do it? I have no idea. But by focusing on something that you can observe changing, it should be simple, and it should have buy-in from all major stakeholders. So if you have several product leads and someone thinks your tool should be a communication tool, and someone thinks your tool should be a productivity tool, and someone thinks it should be a culture building tool, you're never gonna make everybody happy, and you're gonna go around in circles. So part of why we articulate that mission clearly at the top is to make sure that everybody is on the same page and we are all pulling the sled in the same direction. I've got a good example of a mission. I really like YouTube's mission. It's we believe everyone should have easy, open access to information, and that video is a powerful force for education, building, understanding, and documenting world events, big and small. So this is clearly opinionated that it's about information distribution. I'm sure they can and did debate internally. Is it about creators, uploads, watch minutes? Is it for certain verticals? But starting from this strong mission, we can make better metric decisions. Once we have a mission that we like, we can start talking about the specific metrics that apply to it. And there are 5 things that make a good metric. It is aligned to your mission. It is inherently meaningful, and a bit more on this. Inherently meaningful means that it going up or down on its own is a good thing regardless. So if you're on e-commerce, you don't want to pick a metric on likes on social media posts, unless that also translates to sales, right? More likes on social media posts means absolutely nothing, unless you can generate revenue from it. A good metric is movable, it is measurable, and it is really hard to game. So gaming a metric means that it can change without actually solving the underlying problem. And this is basically cheating it, either intentionally or unintentionally. I was having a chat at one of the events this week with somebody about using the metric lines of code. And while that may represent, okay, we're building a product and it takes a lot of lines of code to build a product, if you set me and my team and my bonus based on the length of my query, you should call Guinness, because I'm about to write you the longest query that ever happened, checking each phone number individually. So I could have a lot of lines of code that doesn't do anything. So those are the 5 things to keep in mind. This is a good time to talk about different types of metrics too. I like to divide them into 2 categories, the first being North Star metrics and the second operational. So North Star metrics are aspirational, and they help us make the right product decision when we're planning, when we're thinking through what to do. They are spiritual, but they might not be measurable. Some North Star metrics could be customer retention. If you've got long contracts in a B2B space, it's going to be years before you really realize if these customers retain or not, so it's not very practical. But if you have that in mind as a North Star metric, you might decide to do something different in your product. You might decide to make the changes that your current customers are asking for. And then the sibling to that is our operational metrics. These are very practical and measurable to help us make decisions, and it's best if we can prove some correlation to our North Star as well. So if what we really want is customer retention, we may look at an operational metric that is, we've got clients logging in 4 days a week, means that they are getting value from it, and it would be hard for them to lose this tool. Could be a good proxy for that. Once we have all of our mission and metrics lined up and agreed across the space, we can start talking about goals. What makes a good goal is that it is quantified whenever possible, but qualified in all other cases. It's big enough to move the needle on a real problem. If you set a goal for this half of 2% adoption increase, how many halves would you have to do that to actually make a difference? If in 5 years it wouldn't actually be much different, are you willing to spend 5 years of your product team's time to get that gain? Is a good sense check for if you're aiming high enough here. Again, all the definitions have to be agreed in advance. It is very frustrating when you hit the end of a quarter or a half and people are like, well, what counts as usage? So be very clear with that up front so that there's no question. And then they should be specific. Are you talking about a count or a percent? Are you talking about visitors or visits? Are you talking, if it's a ship goal, which is just a yes or no that I'll talk about in a minute, are you shipping your feature to one interface, to beta features, to every customer? I'm going to talk a bit more about ship goals now as well. The third mistake that companies make are pushing for numeric measurement of metrics before a team is ready. So there's a maturity factor that comes into play here. New products or teams may take ship goals, which is basically just like a yes or no if I did it, and as long as they have plans to move forward into user value and specifically a timeline attached to that. Some examples here is their code complete or the feature is out to 3 beta customers. Once you're beyond ship goals and you actually have a product to talk about, the next thing you want to look at is product market fit. And you've heard a lot about that from the speakers so far in these 2 days. I've sat in on those. And that is some evidence that the feature is meeting a market need, but it may not be at scale yet. It may just be for a smaller group of users, your beta customers' feedback. From there, we can start talking about growth. We need to grow the usage of the feature. This might be adoption, usage, visitation. And once we've grown the feature, now we have to look at product market fit, but at scale on the whole user base. How are people getting value from your product? This might be as simple as usage, as long as we have retention control. It could be about repeat visitation or the specific actual value that people are meant to get from your product or feature. And once we've built user value, that's when we can start talking about monetization and how to make this valuable for you as a company, because there is a reason for people to buy your tool now. You've proven that it's doing something. I'm going to put all of these together into an example today, and that example is going to be about fitness. So I'm setting a personal mission today. We have all formed a company, and our mission is to pull a Kumail Nanjiani and get very fit very quickly. I feel like this room is probably one who has seen both Silicon Valley and the Marvel movies, but if not, Kumail Nanjiani is a Pakistani-American actor and comedian, and he got a role in a Marvel movie and had to make a drastic transformation very quickly. There are good things about this mission. By invoking Kumail, I'm very specific. This is about vanity muscles. It's not about strength. It's not about weight loss. But obviously the thing that I'm doing wrong is I've made this about me, and we know that's a no-no. But for today's example, we'll keep going. So if we've agreed that this is our mission as a company, how do metrics apply? I've come up with a couple of candidate metrics that we can talk through. So one thing we could measure is the hours that I spend at the gym. Practical. Whether or not I am a cover model for a fitness magazine, which he did get after this. Or third, we could talk about percent body fat. So I've aligned the 5 things that a good metric should be across the top, and we can take a look at how these play out. So hours at the gym is not a great metric because I can go to the gym and not actually get fit. I could be cheating it because they have Wi-Fi, and I could just be hanging out, or maybe I'm just not very effective at working out. So hours at the gym has a lot of features that don't necessarily lead to success here. Cover model for a fitness magazine. Interesting. I've probably gotten in good shape as long as I didn't cheat and self-publish one of those. But it's probably very hard to move. Very few people actually get that designation, I guess, so it wouldn't be practical. But when we look at percent body fat, that's a lot closer to something that we can measure. It is aligned with our mission. It is meaningful, because I think all doctors would recommend decreasing that a bit. It is movable, historically, without a medical issue. People have been very successful at improving their fitness this way. It's measurable, and it's hard to game, because there's no lying when you measure that. Once we have the top line metric, the next question is, how does an entire company organize around this? And that's about having missions and metrics that ladder up to the overall company mission. So, overall, our company's goal here is to get ripped. We're gonna measure percent body fat, and our goal for the quarter is to get to 20% body fat composition. If we've got 2 teams that are working on different things, they can each take a piece of that. So we've got the fitness team. They're going to drastically increase exercise. We're measuring calories burned. We are burning 25,000 calories per week, as measured by my new Fitbit. And we're pretty confident that calories burned ties back to fitness. Second team is nutrition. Sensible diet focused on muscle-building protein. Our metrics here are eventually going to be calories consumed and protein intake, but I don't have a lot of background in this area. So for Q3, I'm just taking a ship goal. I want to develop a diet plan that I can then implement in Q4 that will help build towards my Marvel money body. And if I had a secret third team, they would just follow me around and take the cookies. Whenever I've got a cookie, they take the cookie, and that would probably help a lot too. Cool, so that is putting everything together. In summary, a few key things to remember. What you want to do is, again, develop a clear mission that reflects user value. You want to choose metrics that are mission aligned, meaningful, movable, measurable, and hard to game. You need a timeline on building towards user value if you're not there yet. And you want to ensure that the team mission and metrics ladder up to the company mission and metrics. So again, we are all pulling in the same direction. And the three things you want to avoid that will get you ahead of even some of these biggest guys is to avoid developing metrics before the mission, because we'll get ourselves lost and in cycles. You don't want to make the mission about you. It should be about users and user value. And you don't want to push for numerical measurement before the teams are mature, because that's a growth opportunity, and you can start with ship goals and move your way up. Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Questions? Questions? You need to raise your hand, otherwise we won't see you. Okay.
How can you make sure you're defining the mission and not the objective? Because sometimes it's not that clear, maybe.
How are you defining objective?
Tough question.
Yeah. I think, because sometimes the terminology is interrelated, right? So I'm not too bothered about what we call it. The point is, you as a company should know what you are trying to accomplish and for whom. And unless that's there, again, you're going to struggle to set metrics. And so figuring out how to make a mission, I think, is its own topic. I definitely addressed it, because if you have a bad mission or no mission, you're going to struggle on the metric side. But I think what's important is that you understand what you're trying to accomplish in this case, and it might be an objective. The other place I've heard objective is on the objective and key results piece, and that is often very valuable. My issue with OKRs is that people put so many key results and sub-bullets in it. I was on one team that had 27 key results. That's not clear or focused on the 1 or 2 top priorities. So if you use objectives from the OKR format, I would just keep it to 1 to 3, and you'll be safe. Does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Raise your hand. I'll take it. We have here a lot of maybe early stage founders and tech professionals, and we're used to like the general metrics for success. And let's think of companies that maybe they're after the first year, second year, and they can't follow the traditional metrics. Can you give us examples of alternatives to measure it, maybe in awareness, maybe in other directions, so you don't like boggle down the fact that you're not meeting your key metrics? How do you empower your team?
What are you classifying as traditional metrics?
Revenue, clients, growth on social media, let's say, just general ones, easy ones.
Yes, I think that's where we come back to the maturity measurement framework, where I gave you 5 stages to look through. And that's where, before we have a product, we just have to talk about ship goals. We have to talk about actually getting it built. Then we have to start thinking about PMF, product market fit. How does this fit into the market? How do we think adoption is going to go? And I think that's what's to focus on, because you're never going to get a lot of revenue from something without product market fit, right? It's a leading indicator. So it's about thinking about how this fits into the market, thinking about how good of a job you're doing at solving the problem that you set out to build, and then having that timeline on building to growth.
How fast should we change metrics? To look over them again and again, every 3 months,
Ideally not. So you're going to want metrics to, it changes based on the maturity of the product, the maturity of the company, and sort of how focused you are on your mission. If you're at a stage where everybody has agreed on the mission and you're focusing, they should probably only change 6 months at the soonest, but likely it should persist with the mission over several halves, if not years.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? Okay. Coming.
Just asking for a clarification. You mentioned that the goals can be quantified whenever possible and qualified in all other cases. And I don't really understand what that means. Maybe you can illustrate with an example, please.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. Got louder. Quantified goals are obviously numeric, and qualified just have details with them. So, for example, if we are shipping a new version of our feature, is it just to Android? Is it just to beta? Is it globally? Is it to a test? So it's about being very specific about what it is we're shipping. Is it shipping a new version that has the 3 most important client change requests in it? So just by getting very specific about what that is, you can meet the goal, versus if you say ship version 2. Version 2 could be crap. That's not qualified enough. We have to talk about what comes with version 2 and why that's a good thing. Not crap, none of your products are crap, but it could be not significant changes from what we saw originally. Thank you. Any other questions?
Anybody else? I see a hand there.
Hi. How important is tracking these metrics that you set?
Sorry, I missed a word. How important is what?
Tracking, keeping track of the metrics.
Yes, I think it's very important, because once we choose what they are, that is then how we track and communicate our progress externally. It's how we're going to run A/B tests. So once you know what your metrics are meant to be, you should get tracking in place as soon as possible so that you can look at it in as close to real time as you can, as makes sense for your business. Thank you.
Another question? One final question? Anybody? I'll take it then. Okay. You follow the idea, the concept of key metrics and success. What do you think success will mean in the following years?
For who?
For startups. Impact, sustainability.
Oh, yeah. I certainly think that's going to change. I think it's going to be harder to stand out in the market. I think we're going to have more opportunities to snap up talent given the recent layoffs. So I think it's about intentionality is success for me. I think sometimes the startups, you see them sort of scattershot all over and not clearly thinking through what their mission is, not clearly thinking through what their role in sustainability is. So that forethought and having that all sort of written down and summarized, I think is going to be the most important thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.